in 2010, this museum did a community assessment, and they basically found that there was a small group of people who know and love the museum, and then there are a lot of people in our county who don't even know what it is or what's in this building. And thankfully, the board at the time said, hey, this is a problem, we need to change things. And so they wrote a new strategic plan, they parted ways with the last ED, and they wrote this new plan where they said, okay, now our vision is to be this thriving central gathering place for our community. They called me, actually. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time, but working as a consultant. They called me and said, hey, you do this kind of work. This is who we say we want to be. We want to be innovative. We want to be dynamic. We want to be community-centered. We don't really know how to do that. Can you help us? And I said, well, if you really want to do this, then I don't want to just help you for a few hours. I really want to do it. But I only want to do it if we all really feel like this is the vision that we're going for. And I was very clear saying, a thriving central gathering place that is a community meeting space around art, history, ideas, and culture is not a traditional museum. And if we are going to go for this vision, which I'm really excited about, we're not going to look like a traditional museum. And fortunately, everybody said okay. When I came, we had enough cash to cover the next 8 days, and not enough cash to pay payroll in 2 weeks. And so there was a real financial, and no money, no magic check about to come in, so very bad financial situation. I would say that our financial crisis was what enabled us to do a lot of the things that we did, and I don't think that financially we were challenged at all in doing so, except for to the extent that I was always freaked out about just having enough money to pay people. But once we got from having, 7 days of money to having 2 weeks of money to, once we got to about 45 days of money, I still worried about it, but I was able to compartmentalize that. And so I don't think financial challenges have been an issue at all for us. And I think, in a lot of ways, to me, having a place that is about to fail financially and that very few people care about from a community perspective means we don't have, we can take risks. They're not risks anymore. They're the only option. And so, we made a ton of changes that when I talk to people about them, they say, oh my God, what about your traditional donors? What about your members? Did you alienate them? And the reality is that in our case, first of all, those people had clearly not been enough to support this museum anyway. But second of all the people who love this museum want to see it be successful. They all love coming here and seeing tons of people in the galleries. They love seeing it be multi-generational. They love seeing kids here. They love seeing it in the paper. And so I think that in some ways over time, as they get used to the fact that now we are like a high-performing place, they might be more engaged in some of these other issues around, well, what about quality, or, some of these issues that people are worried about when they think about moving towards community engagement or participation. When I went to people to talk to them about helping raise money to, save us, I didn't say, help us save this museum. I said, hey, this museum has been under-delivering for its community and underperforming. We're going to overperform now, but we need some investment to make that happen. And so I was just very honest with people, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to solve the financial problem without having some quick wins on the community side so that people understood what we were about and where we were going. And so we tried as quickly as possible to start doing things that really highlighted to people, here's what we're trying to do, here's the new place we're trying to be, while at the same time obviously having to really find people who were already committed but who had been unsure about where the museum was going and who just needed somebody to say, we are going somewhere and where we're going is really exciting, and be part of that. When I started and we had no community presence and no kind of trust in the community, it was just about saying yes as much as possible, being as flexible as possible, and that was as much internal as external. Internally this had been a museum that produced a very small number of events for a very specific number of people, in a very particular way. And so by saying, yeah, we're going to do a reskilling expo, yes, we're going to, do a party with these people, yes, we're going to do a workshop with those people, it trained all of us to think more broadly about what we're doing and how we do it. So, in a lot of ways, just saying yes helped breathe a lot of life into this museum and helped get us on a new perspective where our starting point is we want to collaborate. We want partners. And so then now we're moving into sort of year 2 of that, and we now, we've hired somebody who is running community programming, and she's fabulous, Stacy Garcia, and she and I have been working on models to really be able to focus where we want to focus our energy for community programs, because there's so many different directions you could go, and we don't have a lot of people. And so we used a format that was developed by a colleague of mine at the North Carolina Museum of Life and Science, Beck Tench. She had made these honeycomb diagrams that basically just showed, here are the 6 goals for this program or whatever. And then what you do is, when you're evaluating a potential new program, you kind of shade in which segments of the honeycomb it hits. And then you can look at all these different ideas we have, and you can kind of say, okay, are we well balanced across all our goals? Are we really heavily weighted in one way? That kind of thing. So what we've started doing, we've started this group called C3, the Creative Community Committee, and it's a big group. It's about, the invite list is about 100 people, and it's about 50 people who come together on an evening once every other month to really tackle a particular thing that we want to play with around that honeycomb. So this first one we just did was focused on meeting community needs. So our 6 goals for community programming, the first lens is meeting community needs. We don't want to create programming that is not needed. There's enough people who want crazy shit here in Santa Cruz for us to satisfy them, as opposed to making up something new. So we want to make sure that what we're doing meets community needs, and that's pretty broad in terms of what it means. Other goals we have are around inviting active participation. We don't want a lecture format. We want formats that really invite people to be actively, physically engaged in what's going on. We have 2 goals that are about social goals, one that's about bonding and one that's about bridging. This comes from Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, and this idea that a really healthy society is one in which you have deep bonding experiences. So say a group of book artists will have a big book arts event, and all these artists who sort of know about each other but don't always work together come together, put on a really cool thing, versus bridging, which is sort of my personal love, which is about events and experiences that bring together people from different communities. And for me, ultimately, that's my underlying mission with all this museum stuff, is how can we use a cultural experience as a starting point for a teenager with a mohawk and a lady with blue hair to come together and do something. And we see that happen here all the time. And then we have a couple of goals that are content related, about art and creativity and about history and culture, which are sort of where our mission is. So we're starting to use that as a framework, but again, starting with community needs. So an example for that is when we think about family programs, we start by meeting with parents, teachers, community members, and asking, what do families need culturally, recreationally, educationally in Santa Cruz County? Forget the museum. What do you need? And we've learned some really surprising things from that. For example, I had no idea, I don't have kids, I had no idea that people need something in the 1:30 to 4 range, which is when a lot of younger kids in particular get out of school and parents are kind of looking for something to do with their kid. And also, parents talked a lot about wanting to be around other adults with kids, that they don't want to always be just my family unit, but that they'd really love to be around other adults. So, we've been talking about, well, should we be doing a weekday afternoon happy hour with crafts? Should we be doing something where there's an activity for kids and there's a more social experience for adults, and it's all really safe and at the museum? We would not have come up with that. We probably, if we were thinking about what should we do as family programming, we might have thought, oh, Sunday at 11 a.m. And actually that is when everybody's at soccer or whatever it is, And so I think that we're really trying to be deliberate in starting from where the needs and the interests are in the community as opposed to what we want to do. Now, the hard part of that, and maybe this is sort of a year 3 thing, is not just starting with the low-hanging fruit, but also thinking about what are the broad needs in our community and how do we really help serve those. And so, kind of on a meta level with partnerships, I don't want to be known as a great arts organization or a great cultural organization or a great educational organization. I want to be known as a small community, as one of the top 5 community organizations that's really about what the soul of Santa Cruz is about. And so for us, that means partnering, seeing who are those top 5 right now, and how can we be involved with them? So we have great partnerships with the Homeless Service Center, very important in Santa Cruz. We have great partnerships with Second Harvest Food Bank, huge. We're working on more partnerships with UCSC and Cabrillo, our big educational anchors, and then looking at different ways to partner. We're doing a few things this summer with Ecology Action and Save Our Shores, which are both environmental. And so, in a community like ours, it's homelessness, it's food, it's environment, and it's education. And so we need to be in that sphere. And so I'm really focused on how do we form the partnerships to be playing and working with those people and be part of the work that's most meaningful to people in this community. One of my challenges now that we have more money is figuring out what are the things that we should spend more money on to take us to the next level, and what are the things that if we spent money on them, it would actually detrimentally impact our perception in the community and our culture. Right now my community programs person, we have a great relationship with the Santa Cruz dump. We go there and get materials to do craft projects. I don't want to lose our relationship with the dump now that we can pay for those materials. On the flip side, we have been so focused on this startup barn raising model. That no money, no bullshit thing means we haven't been paying a lot of people who've been participating with us. And we are now really struggling to think about, for example, how should we be paying artists, And we don't, because our approach is so community-oriented, we will often hold events where we'll have 60 collaborators. And they will range from the Pajaro Valley Quilting Association to, an amazing professional artist to a school group, and there is no payment structure that is going to work for all those people, and that's a real challenge for us. And if we were only working with professionals, it would be much easier for us to solve that particular problem. One of the things I didn't realize coming into an institution in crisis was how much trauma had preceded me coming here. And so there were many times, especially in my first couple months, and I exacerbated it by, my first week laying somebody off, giving us all a 20% salary cut, but at the same time being super transparent with everybody about here's how we're going to build back up to full salaries. There's not going to be a mysterious budget and a mysterious Paul. We're all in this together. For some people that was great. For some people it was probably additionally stressful. I don't know. But this trauma thing, I misinterpreted a lot of things that happened because I just didn't realize what people, how big a shift it is for somebody when they have a new supervisor who has a very different approach, and that people read things really differently. And I think I've learned now two good things have happened. We've built up a lot of trust, and I've learned to be more sensitive to some of the things that I know are hot button issues. But it's sort of like if somebody, if you just start dating somebody who just got out of a long, bad relationship, and they're suddenly keyed in on something very particular, like, oh my God, my ex never cleaned the dishes, and now you didn't clean the dishes, you must be just like, I think I didn't think about that stuff, and I should have asked people, not just what do we want to do together, where do we want to go, but what are the things that have been really hard, and what are the things that I should be aware of, and I wish I had done that. I would say that a new challenge we're having, which is a weird challenge for a museum, is around crowd control and safety. We've had damage to artwork, and as we've become a more welcoming museum with a greater sense of community engagement, we don't want to be a place where there are guards or signs that say don't touch everywhere, but we do want to protect the work. And so it's been interesting to really think about what are other strategies we can use that are less black and white, and how much damage might we consider acceptable, which is like a crazy thing to say in a museum sense, but a lot of museum people would say the trade-off of not protecting the objects is black and white, there is absolutely no trade-off for it, you have to protect the objects at all costs. I feel like, well, this museum's about people, and if we can't create a situation that makes people feel comfortable and has that total black and white barrier on the objects, then we're not doing our job. And so that's sort of an interesting problem. It's also just like, we now hold events that have thousands of people here. We basically held a rave last month that we managed ourselves with, 8 paid staff, 5 of them were here, and a lot of college student volunteers. And it was totally safe. But, my community programs person and I are now talking about, we should talk to the music venues in town and find out how they manage security events. We're museum people. We're rave people, like, but, you know, we're sort of doing that now, and it's just a different business. When we think about projecting or telling the story of numbers, it's very dramatic. You know, in the past year, our membership has gone up from 1,200 member families to 1,700 member families. You know, that's a 40% increase. You know, our attendance has skyrocketed. But the reality is the attendance, the membership, it was so low that there were just huge gains to be made quickly. And so that also helped too in terms of, yes, people are getting involved and getting enthused. There's also a better and better story to tell, and we had really quick results. Now that we have more professional artists coming to us and saying, hey, I'd like to do something with you, but I get paid when I do these things, and we're trying to figure out how can we create a structure that supports different relationships with different individuals or groups to produce programming. And that's, right now, we're in the messy figuring out. I have full confidence that 6 months from now, we'll have a template of, okay, you know, here are the different options for how this can work. And we'll get there, but we're never afraid to try and to screw up and, you know, get some concerned emails from people and then figure out where to go from there. I will say that, and again, I'm not sure how much this is going to change in the future because we've been on this barn raising kind of thing. People are just so excited that the museum wants to do this stuff, and there are so many people who've gotten involved with us and created incredible things and dedicated an incredible number of volunteer hours, and they are just so thrilled. You know, we just did this big fire festival called Glow, and it started because a guy from the community came up to me at a party, and he was like, you know what, we have some of the best fire artists in Santa Cruz. They are complete innovators. They're known as like top artists at Burning Man, and they never get to show their work locally. They've never gotten to do it. And I said, that sounds great. And so we put together this event. It was amazing. We had thousands of people here, tons of press, amazing fire art. And, you know, literally the next morning when we are all exhausted, you know, Steve calls me up and he says, let's plan it for next year. Let's make it bigger. All I want to do is make this as great as we can and raise as much money for the museum as possible. Because it came from something that he wanted to do as a community member, we didn't have to say, we want to do a fire festival. Who can help us? Go find them. Build a relationship. We had somebody who came to us excited to do it and who had the relationships. And so we are trying every day to find more and more ways to invite people to share what they want to do with us. And so, like, behind me are some of these comment sheets from people from downstairs. So when you walk into the museum, the very first thing you see after you walk by the desk is this sign that says, this is your Ma, please share your questions, comments, ideas here. And we have had hundreds of people participate. I have stacks of them. And I pick out ones that have, the ones on my wall are ones that have suggestions. What happens is when somebody says, we want a craft night, it helps us understand, great, here's a community need. What's even better is when they say, I want a craft night, and here's my name and email address, and what often happens, you know, here's an example. This person said, I often thought it would be great to offer art classes for children and adults that relate to the current exhibitions as a way to create more understanding and appreciation for the artwork. I would love to assist with teaching and help generate ideas for different art workshops. Great. Nicole Borges, emailed her. She became an intern here for 6 months, helped us do some great programming. And all the time, when people come up to me with an idea, I always turn around and say, awesome, great idea. Can you help me make it happen? And, you know, it makes it easy and it makes it fun. And I guess that's part of it, is that we're a small staff and we have to extend ourselves with community members, with volunteers and interns and members. You know, we just can't do it all. And so I think that previously this had been an institution, like a lot of organizations, that said sort of like, here's how big we are, so therefore here's how much we can do. And instead we're trying to say, here's how big we are, how can we use what we're doing to spend a lot more of our time reaching out and leveraging and working with people who can help make it like we're, you know, 3 times as big as we are. For me, what drives me in this work is this social bridging aspect, that my ultimate, you know, personal mission is to say, how can we make a healthier, more just, more friendly society by bringing people together who come from different backgrounds. And we're trying in a lot of ways here at the museum to really explicitly do activities that do that kind of social engineering. And I'm not afraid of being overt about that. And I think that, you know, my dream is that we will eventually be in a place where we have some research support for that, and where we can figure out what are the, beyond the museum, what are the community outcomes that demonstrate that that's happening? How do we identify the weak points in that, and how do we, solve those problems? I feel like, what's happened this year for this museum was about seeing an assessment of a museum that was kind of stuck in a traditional model, and, my expertise and my experience was really focused on how do you take a museum and transform it into a place that is participatory, that is dynamic. I don't know how you measure, what the levers are around social bridging. I look forward to learning a lot more about that, and I think that I think that could be many, many, many years of work. I guess, from a leadership perspective, I feel like in the beginning I had all these problems that were both urgent and important. And one of the hard things for me now that the urgency has shifted, is making sure that I don't just stick with the urgent but go to the important. And that's actually kind of hard. And so I think this year, I'm going to learn how to do some things that for a lot of people are pretty boring, like how to delegate more, how to, make sure that there is a next creative challenge that I'm working on that's big picture for our organization, while everybody is supported and continuing to push forward on their own things. One of the negatives about a financial crisis was, but negative and positive, was we really collapsed in as an organization and said, okay, we're this really tight team. Anytime anybody bought something in this last year, even if it was pens, they came and told me, and or they came and asked me before they did it. That's not a good way for an organization to run, And so we need to now take this trust in this team that we've built up and feel more confident with multiple people doing their different thing, and with me being able to differentiate what my role is as the director a little more than just being the leader of this pack of this place that is moving forward. So, yeah, it's exciting.